In the arena of chronographs, the high contrast combination of black sub-registers over a white primary dial surface has come to be known as the Panda, or in the opposite formation, as the reverse Panda. Over the years, these design styles have become some of the most beloved by watch enthusiasts. So in this video, we're looking at a long list of some of the best Panda and reverse Panda dials on the market. So we're gonna be looking at a wide variety of price points, quartz as well as mechanical options, given that we are talking about chronographs, where the affordable end of things might end and start might be very different compared to other genres of watches. Mechanical chronograph typically starts, at least from Switzerland, around $2,000. So just kind of keep all of that in mind when talking about this subject. We will look at some affordable picks at the beginning and then gradually work our way up from there. One other thing I'll mention is Panda. I will try to be somewhat strict about, is it a true Panda or not? There are some exceptions, and I'll give reasons to why maybe a watch was included on this list, maybe without fitting it perfectly as a Panda dial. There's kind of a weird distinction of what we think about as a perfect Panda configuration versus not. So who would have thought I'd ever be talking about, is that a true Panda or not a Panda? I mean, this is the world of watch collecting. Here we are. So some of you might already be aware of this, but TeddyBaldassarre.com is an authorized dealer of Glashütte Original. This is a brand that we just brought on in the last few months, and I am so excited to have them. They are an incredible brand. I would argue if you're looking at high horology watchmaking with some of the most competitive value in all of the industry, we're not even talking about Germany, anywhere, you have to put this brand at the top of the list or near it. 95% of the components are being produced in the region that they're from. Artisanal finishing across the board. This is where you can get a watch with sometimes industrialized pricing for hand finished elements, hand engraving on their balance bridges, precious metal options. Also in the case of their CQ as an example, 24-day excellence test. Now this is a test that they're going to do over 24 days. So before you even get the watch out the door, this is after assembly, after putting together the movement, casing up the watch, they're then going to go through this test on top of that. So think about that, a month before it's even able to leave almost, they are going through these tests to make sure that the quality standard is to that point. Such incredible value. You have collections across the board with their Pano collection, their 60s and 70s models, the Senator, and more. So check it out in the description down below to shop around. So to kick us off here, we're looking at a Panda dial chronograph for under $300, actually under $250. This is the Orient Neo 70. So this is a watch that has become kind of an enthusiast favorite for this genre of watch. The reason this watch has become probably so beloved is given its price and its looks. It does look the part for being a watch under $300. Case diameter is 42 millimeters, thickness of 11.8 millimeters. Still a pretty reasonable lug to lug given the case size. Water resistance of 100 meters, solar quartz movement on the inside, so quartz accuracy, solar power on the inside, so you're not dealing with a battery. And then in addition, you have a mineral glass on top. This was initially released in 2016. Getting these watches can be difficult at times because they're not distributed everywhere. You can't get these from conventional authorized places. You sometimes will have to find it on like an Amazon or something of that sort. If you're in different parts of the world, just look for the different channels and where you can find them. They are a little bit trickier to navigate compared to some of the other watches on this list. But if you're just looking for bang for your buck, this is one you have to add to the list. Next up, another affordable chronograph pick. We have the Timex Q chronograph. So the Q was a model that I would put along with the Marlin as helping to resurge Timex to become more appreciated amongst collectors and enthusiasts. Are they going to blow you away with their specification and what they're bringing to the table? No, but for the price, they're a lot of fun and the designs are on point. This is another example of a watch that just looks pretty cool for its price point if you're only throwing around $200, not to say that's not a lot of money, but considering we're talking about chronographs here, that's a whole different story. 40 millimeter case, 13.5 millimeters of thickness, and that's coming with that domed acrylic crystal on top, quartz movement on the inside, water resistance of 50 meters, very clean, vintage inspired aesthetics, but a watch that, again, $200, pretty tough to argue with it. Now we're getting into a couple watches that I would say are some of the best buys for a chronograph in general under $1,000. Here we have the Seiko Speed Timer. This is the SSC 813. This follows the Panda configuration more than really any other speed timer out there. You're looking at a 39mm case. It does have a lug-to-lug of 45.5mm, but this is a pretty small watch if you ever put this one on the wrist. 13.4mm for its thickness. On the inside, you're getting a solar-powered quartz movement. That is the V192, 100 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, and a price point typically under $700 in most cases. Sometimes you can find it for cheaper than that. When these were released a couple of years ago, these got a ton of love just because of how they were able to represent the old speed timer DNA, while also infusing maybe some Rolex Daytona looks in the process. It looks awesome. I also love how they're able to take the solar cells, making them hidden within the sub-registers. You're getting the look of a Panda, so you're not getting anybody upset, but you're also getting that feasibility of being able to have access of light through that dial in a clean way. So next up, we have the Bulova Lunar Pilot. This is the 43 edition, specifically the white dial version with the blue sub-registers. Some of you might be saying, I don't know any Panda in the wild that is blue and white, but you're gonna have to let this one slide because I think it belongs on this list, and it is a great just pick for under $1,000 for a chronograph in general. Under $900, case diameter 43.5mm, so still on the larger end of things. It is smaller than the previous 45mm option, but is not going to be something that I would say for smaller wrists out there they're going to like. But if you're in that medium to larger wrist range, you're gonna love how this one wears on the wrist. Thickness is reasonable, and also a high frequency quartz movement on the inside with really solid accuracy to go along with it. This is gonna outperform many other quartz movements under $1,000 and getting a cool sweep in the process. You're getting quartz accuracy, high quartz accuracy with the sweep that really mimics that of a mechanical watch. Now we start to get into some watches above $1,000, and one that really falls in this Panda configuration is going to be Baltic. Baltic knocks it out of the park with these heritage-inspired designs. This one especially, this is their tri-compacts. Baltic has played around with different chronographs in the past since their initial launch in 2017. One of the first watches that I remember from them was that initial chronograph that they released early after they became a brand and started to really take the scene by storm. This now moves up into a different price tier, so you're getting closer to that $1,700 to $1,800 range, depending on where you're at in the world. 39.5mm case, 13.1mm in thickness with that SW510 on the inside as a manual wound caliber, 50 meters of water resistance, 47mm lug to lug, sapphire crystal. This watch just looks so clean. The design is clearly inspired by a lot of mid 20th century design. You see some Rolex Paul Newman Daytona in here, but it looks great. And for the price, hard to beat. Baltic's rise is probably one of the most notable of any smaller upstart brand in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think for good reason, just given that they've been able to have this pulse on where things are going, as much as looking at the timelessness of many of these designs and doing it in a way that doesn't feel cheap. Like every single Baltic that I manage to hold, I always feel like it's done with an element of taste and class, and really hard to beat for the money across the board. And they're also doing some cool things with like their MR01, micro rotor movements. They were one of the first brands to truly dive into the world of seagull calibers. They know when to take a risk, but they also know when to not take a risk and just let design lead forward and give people ultimately what they want. An attainable looking vintage inspired chronograph that looks amazing. Another watch that's a long-standing point of value for chronographs in this price range is the Hamilton Intramatic chronograph. This is a watch that I would argue really helped kind of setting the standard of where you could get into the door for a Swiss mechanical chronograph while having some history in the process. Hamilton was very much involved in the development of the first automatic chronograph with those chronomatics, and looking at the early 1970s that really brought forth the design that you're looking at here. So this is paying a lot of reverence to that initial design of Hamilton during those periods in the late 60s and 70s. The watch across the board looks phenomenal too. You have a 40mm case, 14.4mm in thickness, 49mm lug to lug, water resistance of 100 meters, automatic Valjoux caliber on the inside, sapphire crystal. I love the sub-register layout. It is following a traditional Valjoux configuration, but it works really well, feels balanced, sporty with some dress versatility, I would argue, depending on the strap configuration that you go for. Love this watch. It's one that I have always been a fan of, and probably still, even to this day, one of the best chronographs you can find for around $2,000. So I don't know if it'll be out by the time of releasing this video, but I have something in the works covering this watch because I think it is an amazing piece, cool history, underrepresented in terms of typically being mentioned when looking at entry-level attainable chronographs with a Swiss powered movement on the inside. Here we have Hanhart. This is their 417 ES. This is looking back to a 1950s design that has a lot of pedigree. Hanhart as a brand first started with producing stopwatches and then transitioned into chronographs, a lot of them being produced for military units and Air Force across the globe. Here you have a watch that directly represents a model they created in the 1950s for the German Air Force. This is the 417 reference. Steve McQueen was also supposedly a huge fan of this watch as well. Manual Salida caliber on the inside, 39mm case, 13.3 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 46 millimeters, 100 meters of water resistance. This one just checks off the boxes. I love the sizing, the dimension set, the history's there. It looks amazing as well. It's unlike any other chronograph you've probably seen on this list so far. It has that design DNA, it can lean and say its own. And as you're seeing with some of the watches on this list, that's not something that can always be said. So a true watch that stands on its own, and a watch that I'm gonna be covering a little bit more in detail because I think this is such a cool piece. Another watch in the mix for that entry-level Swiss mechanical chronograph is the Tissot PRX Chrono. The PRX, we have now established many times on this channel, the history here. Late 1970s C-Star reference, first initially unveiled a few years ago, took the industry by storm on the under $1,000 segment. First with Quartz, then came the mechanical options, the Powermatics, 35 to follow as well. And then we also saw a chronograph in this whole process become available. Now these are going to be larger watches at 42 millimeters, and with that integrated case, I'd say they wear like a 42.5 to 43 millimeter on wrist, so they're not to be confused with a smaller case watch. 14.8 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 46.5 millimeters, but I would say this wears closer to that 50 millimeter lug to lug length when you factor in that end length. That's where I would probably estimate it out. 100 meters of water resistance, Attainable on the inside, sapphire crystal, looks amazing. Bracelet's still well finished, although you're not really getting anything in addition to what you will get with the finish of those Powermatic versions and really even those Quartz versions. But it just goes to show how well finished this case is, where it can still sit in a watch that's closer to $1,900 and still not feel out of place. Another watch to mention here is the Maurice Lacroix Icon Chronograph. Maurice Lacroix, you could say what you want about this design being a little bit more on the nose compared to some of the other watches with this integrated style, but there's no question in terms of its finishing, its attention to details, it is a very well done watch. 44 millimeter case here, 15 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 50 millimeters, and a water resistance rating of 200 meters, which is pretty interesting for a chronograph. Automatic value 7750, sapphire crystal. I mean, Maurice Lacroix was one of the first brands, I would say, in the past, say, decade that was able to recognize that there's something here with this integrated style design. Now, they didn't pioneer this like the brands in the 70s, but they were able to recognize that there was something missing in the market at more of an attainable end. In this case, Attainable is saying sub $5,000, so this isn't the most attainable of things that we've seen on the list so far. But for all things considered, Swiss-made watch, well finished across the board with the case, the dial, and its approach. And of course, being a Panda, thought it made sense to include in a list like this. Now, Longines is no stranger to chronographs. This is a newer chronograph from the brand, the Longines Conquest chronograph. A lot of the Conquest collection have seen a huge facelift in the last year or so, and I think they've done a nice job with really cleaning up the three-hand models, and this collection too with the chronographs follows the same elements of the three-hand and infusing the idea of a chronograph in the process. And this follows the same premise as the three-hand model and makes it work in a chronograph option. 42 millimeters for the diameter, 14.3 millimeters for its thickness, lug to lug, a little bit on the longer end. I'd say this wears true to the 42 millimeter size with that 50.2 millimeter lug to lug. Water resistance of 100 meters, also getting an automatic movement on the inside. So this is where you start to see some more elevated components with that silicone balance spring on the inside, 60 hours of power reserve right under that. And Longines is responsible for some of the most legendary chronographs with their 13ZN in the 20th century and their military designs. This is just a brand that's so underappreciated when it comes to their contributions to watchmaking throughout history. So next up we have Frederic Constant with the High Life chronograph. Now Frederic Constant I don't think is appreciated enough for what they've been doing from a movement production standpoint. Many different in-house calibers, and this is a brand that has not been around nearly as long as many other brands on this list, but that has not stopped them from producing some crazy innovations. If you looked at their monolithic calibers, as well as some of their high frequency movements and what they're doing there, they're not afraid to take a chance, and I applaud them with that. The High Life is their approach to more of that integrated style of design. This is a 41mm case, thickness of 14.3mm, water resistance of 100 meters, and then a movement on the inside is the La Joux-Perret L100. La Joux-Perret is underneath the Citizen Watch Corporation in terms of its ownership, but it's a movement manufacturing organization that has started to see more frequency in their use across the industry, typically delivering better power reserves. I also think some of the finishing on some of their movements is going to be a step up compared to some off-the-shelf calibers, of Bosch calibers from the likes of Etta and Sellita. Here you're getting a 4 Hertz movement, 60-hour power reserve, and getting a column wheel in the process. Next up, we have a fan favorite. This is the Tudor Black Bay Chrono. A lot of design inspiration coming from the Daytona family, but it's coming from Tudor, the sister brand of Rolex. So I think many people see the affiliation, but they were also able to infuse design elements from the Black Bay family that made this also feel like its own thing. And I think they did an exceptional job at that. 41mm case, 14.2mm in thickness. They were able to move around that thickness by moving up the dial closer to the crystal to allow more space for the movement so it can sit flatter on the wrist. Lug to lug of 49.8mm. I'd say this watch wears pretty true to size, even wearing smaller than some of the other Black Bays, given the thickness element that you're talking about here, while adding a chronograph. Pretty impressive. The other important aspect to mention about this watch is the movement on the inside. This is the MT5813, which basically is in reference to the B01 movement on the inside. So Tudor and Breitling exchanged some technologies. So this currently sits as the most entry point to getting into the Breitling B01 movement on the entire market, and that's also including any of Breitling's offering, which to me is pretty incredible because the B01 is probably one of the best chronograph movements that you can find for under $10,000, let alone under $6,000. Now, speak of the devil, we have Breitling coming up next. Now, here is the Breitling Premier B01. I am such a huge advocate for the Premier family. I know the Navitimer for so many, and for good reason. That's the icon that people first think of when they're thinking about Breitling. The Chronomat as well, Super Oceans, there's all these established points of history, but the Premier line is such a beautiful, understated line of chronographs, and also giving you some different case options and looks compared to what maybe you would typically assume from Breitling. 42mm case in this instance, 13.6mm for its thickness, lug to lug of 49.5mm. This one wears very true to size, if not slightly smaller, I would say. 100 meters of water resistance, and an automatic B01 on the inside. The other thing that I think gets lost on people too with the Premier is you see all these names, you hear all these names from Breitling. People don't consider that the Premier name goes back to the 1940s when a name like the Navitimer really originated in the 1950s. So the history is there. Yes, the design is perhaps not as sporty and what people are typically associating with the brand, but no doubt some very clean looking watches. Moving along to another brand that excels when it comes to chronographs, we have Zenith with their Chronomaster Revival A384. 1969, Zenith El Primero comes out. Movement takes the industry by storm in many ways, but it was short-lived because of what happened with the Quartz crisis. But it doesn't take out this iconic nature of this movement and what it was able to do for the entire industry. Operate at 5 Hertz, power the Rolex Daytona for over a decade. The Zenith, in terms of its story as well, as being this underrated manufacturer to almost potentially being lost to the Quartz crisis, but then coming back. This is the A384 case design, which is unlike any other case that I've ever tried. It almost wears like a square rectangular case, but you're not getting that traditional look that you would typically associate with a watch like that. It's a 37mm diameter, 47mm lug to lug, and a 12.8mm in thickness. The layout for the registers are also so beautifully done within this kind of tonneau shape. Movement on the inside is the El Primero caliber 400, 5 Hertz of its beat frequency, so 36,000 vibrations per hour, sapphire crystal on top. And also all the Chronomasters, one thing I really like about them too, you look at chronographs, like look at the list that we have here and some of the things that we're mentioning with thickness, usually many of them over 14mm thick. Chronomaster coming under 13mm thick. So one of the thinnest chronographs that you can find for under $10,000 to go along with all these other incredible feats that the El Primero was able to establish in the late 1960s. So I was questioning whether or not to put this watch on the list because it doesn't follow the conventional format when talking about Pandas. Now, this was the whole science I was talking about at the beginning. I never thought I'd be arguing Panda or no Panda. That was not what I thought my life trajectory would be, but here we are, and I'm excited to do it. But I'm going to put this watch on the list because it almost helped establish the standard for where many people even think of a Panda style dial configuration for previous iterations of what we saw from this model family, the Rolex Daytona. Now, the modern example is maybe not going to fit that same epitome of an idea that the formers were, but I do think there's still elements here with how the layout of the sub-registers are and getting some contrasting, maybe not to the contrasting effect that we would see from some other Panda dials. It still does work though. These are also some of the most universally wearable watches out there. 40mm case, thickness of 12.5mm, lug to lug of 46.5mm, wears like a dream across so many different wrists, water resistance of 100 meters, and the automatic Rolex 4131 on the inside. So this is a watch that we've actually reviewed on the channel before. It looks so amazing with the Panda configuration on an integrated sports watch. Vacheron Constantin's overseas Panda chronograph. A little bit of a larger watch, 42.5mm, 13.7mm of thickness, so reasonable on that measurement. The lug to lug also not totally unreasonable. It is a larger watch, so I would say probably for medium to larger size wrists out there, but you're wearing a Vacheron Constantin overseas, right? You know what you're getting into. I think you can pull this off more than you might think. 150 meters of water resistance, automatic VC caliber on the inside. That's the 5200 and the sapphire crystal on top. Overseas traces back originally to the 222. It was not named the overseas, but that's where you could probably pinpoint the initial precursor to where the overseas would eventually come in the 1990s. The movement is very well finished. You're getting a gold tone rotor, 5200 caliber on the inside, column wheel with a vertical clutch. Easily one of the leading Panda style chronographs in this high horology tier. So a brand that I have become very fond of is Parmigiani. Here we're looking at a watch that I would say is in a collection that is responsible for their resurgence. This is the Tanda PF Sport Chronograph. So just looking at some of the specs, 42mm case, 12.9mm in thickness, water resistance of 100 meters, and an automatic PF070 on the inside, sapphire crystal on top. So a few things I really like about the Tanda PF. One is the case is exceptionally finished. The dial is beautiful, it's understated, it's not gonna just scream in your face compared to some of the other watches that we've seen on this list so far. It's going to be for someone that does not need attention to know that they have a badass watch on their wrist. Also, the movement on the inside, this is a 5 Hz chronograph movement. There are not many in the entire industry that are going to be operating at that rate. This is one of them, and it's also doing it at an artisanal level with its finish. Parmigiani also has the benefit of having stake in the movement manufacturing arm Bochet, so they have a lot of capabilities in what they're able to pull off. In the process, still getting some sporty upside here, 100 meters of water resistance, beautifully finished dial, again, very understated. Movement is well done to go along with it in both its looks and its performance. And then for the final watch on this list, this is, to me, one of the pieces that comes to mind when thinking of that aspirational pursuit of a Panda style chronograph. Here we have Audemars Piguet with the Royal Oak chronograph. This is a watch to me that is so emblematic of the type, maybe not to the level of the Daytona, but it looks so damn good. And if you are going to stretch for a crazy amount of money and want to do it with some class, but also with some ability to make a statement, this is probably as good as it gets. 41mm case, thickness of 11mm, so pretty thin here on the wrist. And then you have an automatic movement on the inside. This is the 2385. The Royal Oak chronograph came along first in the late 1990s. Modern versions here is in the 41mm case and still wearing incredibly well on the wrist. Now, it's not going to have the craziest decoration in terms of its movement. It does operate at 3 Hz for its operation and 40 hours of power reserve. But what are you getting this watch for? You're getting this watch for the design. How does the dial work with the rest of the case? How does it look on the wrist? How does the bracelet form to the wrist and just create this extension off of what is happening from the inner center of the dial and making this whole package that work cohesively as one unit. A beautiful timeless design that has become one of the worthy icons in luxury watchmaking. But all right, guys, that's my video here today looking at some Panda style chronographs, wide variety of price ranges. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really do appreciate that. Also check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, if you are in the market for a watch, how we're able to do everything that we're doing here with our productions and releasing content is through selling watches. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business. It allows us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.